I'm a cleaner for haunted houses. Skulls pierced with black daggers keep appearing, Part 1. I remember my very first day of work, nearly 6 months ago, with horrifying clarity, the memories still shining like keloid scars across my mind. My new partner and I got sent to a Victorian house in the middle of a forest of dead, twisted trees. Our boss, an old Greek man with balding hair who chain-smoked Marlboros constantly, had warned us that the scene would be a fiasco. An entire family of 6 had suffocated from a freak carbon monoxide leak. Soon after that, the bizarre occurrences began. They sent a repairman out there for something or another, George explained through a cloud of thick, gray smoke, smashing out a half-smoked cigarette and lighting up another one without pausing. We sat in the office across the desk from him, wearing our dark blue uniforms with the logo of Big George's Cleaners emblazoned across the chest. I had laughed when I first saw the name of the cleaning business. Big George sounded like the name of a 7-foot-tall pimp to me, not this small, bent man with a thick Greek accent and white fluffs of hair forming a wispy horseshoe around his head. So what happened? I asked. George inhaled deeply, meeting my gaze. Well, I don't know exactly what he saw, but he was screaming about babies' arms and spiders. I groaned. Dead spiders? My partner, Xavier, asked hopefully. George shook his head ruefully. Don't know, son. I figure you'll find out when you get there, eh? George got up and slapped me on the back in a fatherly way. Don't worry. You're in good hands with Xavier. He's worked here for over 3 months. One of our longest-lasting employees. I looked over at my new partner doubtfully. Gang tattoos ran up the lengths of his arms, and he had a teardrop tattoo below his left eye. He looked like the type of person who only got a job to keep his parole officer happy. We walked out into the clean summer air, the small town around us bustling with midday traffic. Xavier pointed to the panel van parked behind the building, an ancient, black rusted heap of a van with the company's logo peeling off the side. That's our ride. She's a beauty, huh? Xavier said. I smiled politely. What's your name again? Brian, I said curtly. Brian Fellman. So this company has a high turnover rate, huh? High turnover rate, high disappearance rate. He shrugged apathetically. None of my business. That's why we get hazard pay, right? He laughed, a shrill, dry sound that sounded much higher than his normal voice. We got in, and Xavier put on some blaring rap song that I tried to block out. We drove for what felt like hours, going deeper and deeper into the middle of nowhere. The GPS started taking us down pothole-strewn dirt trails, before finally failing completely 5 miles from the place. We drove up and down the road until, after 30 minutes of searching, we found the only house in the area. The thin, looming turrets loomed overhead, like sharp spikes set up to impale the sky. The exterior of the building appeared dull and filthy, the white paint yellowed with age. Cracked windows covered in dust and grime leered at us from the top floors. Well, that's gotta be it, I said, glancing down at the paperwork George had given us. It just said 1, Ghoulish Road, Barton. I looked up at the house, but it had no number on it. The road hadn't even had a street sign. From what I saw, Barton probably didn't have more than 100 people living in it. Perhaps they didn't use street signs in such an abandoned area. Then I saw the police crime scene tape rolled out in an X across the door, and I knew we had arrived at the right house. I hate spiders, Xavier offered like a piece of sage advice, sighing. He lit a cigarette in the van, which technically wasn't allowed, but, after all, no one was here to complain. He handed the pack to me, and I took one. I looked over at him. Well, as long as they're dead, who cares? I said. He got out and started putting on protective gear, tucking his pants into his socks, while he fished out 2 pairs of thick rubber suits. They are dead, right? He gave me a grim smile. I sighed as I looked down at the suit. It looked like something an Axis frogman might have worn during World War II. I wondered where George got half this stuff. After we both put on the hot and stuffy rubber suits, Xavier reached into the back doors of the van and pulled out 2 gas masks. I stuffed one on my head and began adjusting the straps, making sure it was airtight. It felt somewhat suffocating and also obscured my peripheral vision. Two small circular holes of ballistic glass were the only opening for sight. I glanced over at Xavier. He looked like a cross between a SWAT officer and a scuba diver figurine from a fish tank. I figured I looked exactly the same. We took the canisters of poison with a sprayer nozzle out of the van. I strapped the heavy metal cylinder to my back. "Just in case," Xavier said with fake nonchalance as he put on his own sprayer. Spiders have a tendency to be hardy little bastards. Supposedly, the exterminators already came and sprayed the house once, according to George, but he trailed off, his voice quivering with fear at the end. I could see his eyes rolling and wild behind the mask. Yet he still walked towards the door, ripped away the police tape and walked right inside. I followed close behind him. The front hallway looked totally dark. I tried flicking a light next to the door, but I got absolutely no response. I didn't know if the electricity was cut or if the light bulbs had all gotten smashed by vandals. I took out a small LED flashlight from the random items looped into my work belt, clicking it on and shining the bright white beam around. An instinctual, primordial horror came over me as I saw what scurried all around us. It looked like brown recluse spiders, some of them nearly a foot long, and they most certainly were not dead. There were thousands of them, but that wasn't even the worst part. They all had strange, small, white baby legs and arms, slightly longer and more emaciated looking than something taken from a Barbie doll. Each had 4 grasping arms in the front and 4 bent legs in the back. Except these didn't look plastic. All the miniaturized limbs looked real, with tiny dimples in the elbows and smooth rolls of fat like an infant's. The spiders made sounds that sounded almost human. They opened their fanged mouths and cried out with the cooing or shrieking of a baby. Infantile cries began to sound all around us, echoing and mixing in a cacophony of high-pitched shrieking and wailing. I tried to block it out, pulling out my poison nozzle to start spraying. I took a headlamp George had given me out of my belt and flicked off the flashlight. I looked for the best place to start. A layer of dead spiders littered the floors, their curled-up doll legs facing upwards, with tiny fingers clenched in death. The white skin of the miniature human appendages peeled off in dry, papery layers. But I didn't look at the hundreds of spider corpses for too long, because at that moment, something heavy landed on my shoulder. I screamed through my gas mask. The sound came out muffled and choked. Spinning around crazily, I tried to get the spider off my protective suit. I craned my head and saw a massive brown recluse only inches away from my face. I gasped as I looked at this mutated abomination. It had 6 black, soulless eyes. The pincers clicked open and closed, dripping clear fluid. The venomous spider's long back had a marking like a dark brown violin. As its pincers flew wide open, it opened its mouth wide, and I saw teeth inside no spider should possess. Tiny, fanged teeth, like the canines of a human. It had an entire set of these sharp, vampiric fangs. Then, in a blur, it lunged for my face. I felt it smash into the side of the gas mask, and then, emanating cries like a hungry baby, it tried to bite through it. I dropped the large poison canister I carried and ran shrieking towards the door, more spiders falling down all around me as I went. Some jumped from the ceiling. Others skittered over the bodies of their comrades, bodies that covered the floor like a rug from some nightmarish acid trip. Xavier hadn't fared much better. I heard him close behind me, his steel-toe boots smashing the mutated corpses with muted thuds. I felt like I couldn't breathe in the confining gas mask. I had a sudden insane urge to rip it off. But I felt more spiders skittering across my shoulders and back now, and I knew that both of us were likely covered. A large part of me wanted to run screaming from that house, clean the century-old wood with the pungent, refreshing smell of gasoline and watch those abominations burn. We sprinted out the door out into the summer light streaming down from a clear blue sky, covered in dozens of the freakish spiders. One of them skittered up my chest and covered my face. I couldn't see anything, but I still had the poison canister attached to my back. I brought it up and began spraying it at the abomination. It gave a very human whimper as its doll legs began to kick and seize, its surreal mouth opening into a O of surprise. It gave a cry like a starving infant and fell to the black earth in front of me, its miniature demonic face finally relaxing as the mouth went slack and its 6 eyes glazed over. Over the next few minutes, Xavier and I killed all the spiders that still attached themselves to our thick rubber suits. To my horror, a few dozen of them streamed out the open door and into the surrounding dead trees. I ran over as soon as I saw them escaping. I wondered if they would begin a new population of mutated, freakish, spide